Hello, everybody. We're here. The at-home production, but we're gonna have to talk a lot about a lot of things here. Just start it up. But first up on our list of topics, which we'll be getting through after we do our intro, of course, because the intro is very important, is Overwatch League online this weekend. The future of Overwatch. What are we expecting?
And then last week we saw the Echo exhibition match with the Overwatch League as well as the battle for LA. But then we're going to go into more information with Jeff Kaplan's 4th year anniversary interview.
It's going to be a little bit spicy there. I'm Avast. This is Jayne, and welcome to the at-home contested. And we're back. And we're back again. There it is. There's our bumper. It's a learning process. Yes. We are not in the Frontier Communication Studio in Dallas, Texas anymore, Jayne. We're at home. We're at home.
Really quite a shame. We just got this fancy new studio. Again, the Frontier Communication Studio, which we're very much not in. You've got your green screen, and I've just got my living room here. But you know what? We're both under a shelter-in-place order here in Dallas, Texas. But being an esports organization and primarily an online broadcaster, well, the show must go on, and the show is here, and the show's name is Contested, and we still got a lot of things.
Yeah, we have a lot of things to talk about still. It's been a very busy time, actually. We've had updates even today about what's going on with the league. But, we'll pretend that this green screen is what's separating. This is my work area, and behind that is my home area, even though I'm at home. So just pretend I'm in a very green room, and pretend that Jayne, too, is in a very green room. Just, you wouldn't know.
This is a green screen, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a green screen.
Yeah.
It's not actually in his apartment. You would
no,
know.
Definitely could not. I can't roll back just because it'd fall over. It's not actually there or anything like that. But let's get right into the topic. So first, starting off, we're going with the Overwatch League online competition. So after all of the different rescheduling formats, of which there is still both rumors and updates we've had just today about some updates, this week we're going into the super craziness of 16 games in a single weekend, starting at 1 a.m. Pacific, ending at 9 a.m. Pacific. And then we had some updates as well from the Spitfire as well as the Titan.
Yeah, they're both going to Korea. There's an article that just came out, and they're talking about how they're going to both teams are going to go back to Korea for citing public health concerns, and they feel like they feel more appropriate being there perhaps, and they're going to have to amend the games for those. Now, it doesn't mean that the games are going to be canceled. I don't think they'll probably just amend them, and then the rest of the games will probably be not really that affected, but there'll probably have to be some sort of change of the schedule there. But they're both said that they're going back to Korea. They're not going to be in the States.
It is going to be a big of a change, and we haven't had a communication or any official announcement about when that move is going to happen. Again, the Spitfire and the Titans being the two teams that are rumored to be going back to Korea for a number of reasons, but of course COVID-19 and its impact on the United States being no small portion to that. And with that, with the Overwatch League themselves having separated the competitive groups into the kind of the two regions, like the Chinese group and the American group, that also means that not only is it just going to be these two teams, if they're traveling back to Korea during the weekend, but if they are going to be following the rules or at least the structure that they'd set up in terms of the ping guideline, it also means that the schedule is going to change quite dramatically. Fuel is actually one of the teams that would most likely be impacted quite heavily by this, as Titans, they're in their division, but now being across the seas, it's very unlikely that they would be playing nearly as many games with the Dallas Fuel after the Overwatch League updates their schedule.
Yeah, there are some good benefits, I feel, there in that we can take like a bloated East division for the Overwatch League, since the Spitfire are going to be moving back to that Korea/Chinese division, that we can up the number of games there, the number of teams playing there, same with Titan going there, and we reduce the number in East, but then an already small Pacific division is getting even smaller. So we're running to a universe where Fuel is probably saying, okay, great, like that's one less team I have to play, but then the division's very small. So what's an easy compromise I could feel is you put Houston into the Pacific Division too, because they're technically central as well. So you could move Houston out of the Atlantic to the Pacific. Yeah.
You
can put them there.
At this point, really anything goes. If any one of these things had happened in a different season, like season 1 or season 2, the questions about a competitive integrity would have been completely different. But at this point, we are so far off script of what normal looks like. I think any of these changes, it's kind of, the absolute crazy the absolute unthinkable has almost become normal, and at this point it's just like do whatever we can in order to make sure that games can happen. This isn't like it's the actual Olympics, the Olympics just having been delayed an entire year. We're an online sport, and games should and must go on as much as they can, because it is a pretty important year for the Overwatch League as a whole. Even before all of the rescheduling and the changes had come into this year, people were still considering the Overwatch League more or less in a make it or break it year. And even though all of these changes are happening, there's nothing really to say. Reality doesn't stop for anybody. We are still in a very critical year for the Overwatch League to show some success. And so far, if we are measuring success based on ability to operate through a crisis, Overwatch League, especially the reschedules, I know they must be working complete overtime. They're doing pretty well, but it is a pretty high stakes year and a high stakes moment for the league as a whole.
Yeah, you have to pivot your production all the time. You have to, pretty much you couldn't get crazier unless you did like it's like the infinite monkey like typewriter theorem, where all the monkeys are banging away at the typewriters. That's pretty much where we're at right now at this point with Overwatch, and really a lot of the other esports is that we did a test run for those games production wise, because I feel like last week that's pretty much the reason they had to reschedule them, is because production wasn't ready. They could have chosen to maybe do a ghost crew in the studio in LA, but they felt they probably couldn't get, that wasn't the safest route, so they chose to go full cautionary, right? And they put everyone at home, but they had to get they had to get production kits to everyone. I mean, take for example like ZP, who is a caster, but he's not living in LA, so they have to ship him a stream kit for him to be able to actually have the setup to cast the Overwatch League. And so these exhibition matches that happened, last weekend or this weekend that just finished, was sort of a test run for that. That's probably what we're going to be going forward with. But it's still on that topic of competitive integrity, Jayne.
Yeah.
How do we even maintain it? How do we maintain it at this point?
It's not just the producers. The producers can't go into the studio because of that shelter-in-place order that came out the state of LA, which is again very similar to the order that you and I are now under, and why we're making this production using an online video call. But even looking around the league, you see one of the observers posted on Twitter, for example, his observing setup, which he's now observing remotely from a home PC with all of his monitors thrown up on his desk. But it's not just the producers who are doing this at home. You're now having the Overwatch League players themselves playing on home setups, and I'm pretty sure that in most leagues that would be a more or less unthinkable setup, because how do you control for cheating? Now everybody's going to be approaching this from the point of view that these players have been playing for so long on LAN that they're proven that they aren't cheating, and this is very likely not a factor. But even though the risk is very likely not high, the risk of having these potentials for cheating are not zero, and there's no real way for you to actually stop them if they are on these home setups in these uncontrolled environments. We can't even master anti-cheat in the rank system. I'm not saying that anti-cheat is a very easy engineering challenge in the first place, but now there's kind of like, we are in uncharted territories. These are still official matches, but they're feeling very much kind of like the wild, wild west of the esports days before the league even actually got off the ground to begin with all the, the home-baked productions and the load-bearing ficus, and
we all need a ficus. They should have included that all need a ficus kit. Everyone should get a ficus right now for Overwatch production and content. We should all have a ficus. That's the point of the green screen. Hopefully we can engineer this later where I can put the slasher ficus behind me at some point, and I think we'll be set.
As soon as I'm able to get out of my apartment, I'm gonna have to go buy myself a ficus, and we'll just
put it right
here.
there.
It'll be my co-host.
Just have the ficus.
It'll be just as good as a co-host as you.
This will be the first time I'll ever say it, Jayne. I'll ever say this is. I think now teams, if you have a team house, you probably are feeling pretty happy with yourself if you have a team house versus apartments.
Very much so.
I don't like apartments or team house setups generally as much these days for esports, because it's like it feels very a relic of an older time, and there's no separation between that work and life balance that you sometimes is a problem. Well, not sometimes is a problem with esports, but now if you have a team house, you can have all your players there. Your staff can be like essentially looking over their shoulder as they're playing the game. Now, obviously, we're going to trust that for Overwatch League that there's going to be some measures in place and there's going to be an honor system and all that things. But, a team house does give you that extra edge when it comes to this new online setup. And also all of your players are in a central location still versus the apartments where they may be in the same complex, but they're split all over. And you could have varying hardware issues, all this quality control issues, because that's really the problem with competitive integrity. It's not just the cheating. It's like, how do you deal with the multitude of different internet providers, different hardware setups if you didn't give everyone a different PC because some teams didn't? It's just so many factors that go into place of making sure stuff is consistent, whether it be ping, hardware, cheating, everything.
Even referees, with the referees being able to be on site, those are the ones that you usually go to when you have a technical problem. But how do they actually have, there's no way that they've written a new rule book. So the chances of them going kind of completely off script and having to actually deal with a problem that they've A, never encountered before is pretty high, and B, haven't prepared a very distinct response for it. Anytime the referees have, like, if a mouse goes down or, a monitor starts flickering or a hard drive fails or something like that, which are all things that have happened in the Overwatch League. If these things happen on home computers, does this mean that you can actually call for a remake on the game? Be like, oh, we had technical issues, because previously those technical issues would have been the responsibility of the league. Now these technical issues are the responsibility of the players and the teams. The referees aren't there to assist or communicate. Even if you do say that the problem is that the client is glitching, there's no real way for a referee who's not on site to actually verify what the issue is. So if you wanted to be, a real snake as a player, team, or a coach, you could absolutely abuse these things to try and get, rematches or delays or whatever. And there's no real way that the Overwatch League, without kind of an on-site referee, could actually enforce or determine what the actual state of the situation.
I mean, they could be doing the remote viewers where you take control of the other PC and you take a look at it like a tech support does often. Maybe Overwatch League is going to have that installed in all the PCs to be like, okay, let's take a look at your connection here. Sinatra, looking pretty good. I see that the client is glitching out, so we'll get you a new one soon. But, there's no way to really obviously control that. And so if we run into issues, it's going to be a testing ground, because also in the topic of this competitive integrity, Jayne, you brought it up earlier, was the games. We have 16 games this week. And now it might change with Titans and Souls saying or Spitfire, I should say, wanting to go back to Korea. Mm-hmm. But with 16 games, and between those two days of games, between the 2 days of 8 games each, there's like a 5-hour gap, I think, like a 5-hour gap. Yeah.
And the last game is at 9 a.m. and it goes till, assuming that game goes to 11 p.m. with no after show, and then the next game is starting at 1 a.m. So it's just the tiniest of gaps. It's like, in terms of, it's not just, you're talking about this is going to be a bit of stress on the teams that are actually playing themselves, but the logistics of getting that all into work. And then people were saying that I believe that there was a statement going around that Zoe, for example, is hosting like the entire weekend of games.
Just a quick 48-hour shift. Just one of those. Just a quick 48-hour shift.
Just no problem. Like, if you kind of embrace the scuff and how loopy that's going to make people, it's like,
it puts stress at every point, because it's not just a new broadcast format. It's on the broadcasters and the producers themselves, on the observers who are also doing part of the producing, on the hosts, on the desk people, on the casting. On top of that, there's also, once again, we get into the fact that if games are running for this long every day, 2 days in a row, like, imagine the schedule for your team during this time, right? Like, you're definitely not going to be scrimming more than likely. You're getting warm-up scrims more than likely. Like, who knows? It's going to be tough, but it's possible. But then if your game's at like 11 p.m. at night, just imagine you spent a whole day. Like, you're not going to wake up at like 9 p.m. getting ready for your game, right? Like, you're obviously going to be up before that, but you're waiting the entire day or something to play. And you could go until like 1 a.m. and then the games start 3 to 4 hours after that again.
Yeah.
That is another schedule.
And with 30 hours of games happening in a single weekend, like, you really have to kind of ask yourself, what is the appetite of your average viewer for competitive Overwatch? We're not at the point where people are being able to get these tokens from being able to leave the stream AFK. So this is also a problem if we're looking at the league, because their viewership numbers are also very likely to struggle from this. Maybe not because of the fact of the quarantine and the shelter in place. Maybe everybody is at home, completely bored out of their minds with nothing else better to do except watch, 32 hours of Overwatch in a single weekend. But, that's also a concern. On the other hand, however, esports still hasn't really broken into the mainstream yet, and the viewers who do watch it are, assumed to be at least a little bit more connected, a little bit hardcore, understanding more. We're still more of a kind of a tight-knit, singular community. I would think that more people are fans of Overwatch in general rather than fans of a single Overwatch team than, for example, football fans would be fans of a specific football team over the league itself. There's still probably quite a large number of people who are simply fans of the game and fans of the league, who hopefully will become more kind of understanding, or at least kind of laugh and embrace the scuff, is really this point that you're at, and kind of what you're hoping from the fans, because the entire, it's not just esports, it's not just Overwatch. There's a lot of things that are being shut down and struggling. So hopefully people are understanding, despite maybe their cabin fever and boredom from the lack of.
Hey, I'm embracing the scuff. We're embracing the scuff. We're very scuff. I would say right now, technically, we might have equal production to our local news team, where the weathercasters over there are just like, look at the clouds, and it's clearly just lagging behind as all the assets like come back in, and he has like a webcam mic. Sometimes you get pretty scuffed everywhere.
I saw in chat somebody was saying that I was broadcasting on a UHF signal, and really that's probably pretty close to the truth. I didn't have a computer in my apartment. I'd been using it at the office and the studios, so we had it was like 24 hours. The office is going to be locked down. You got to work from home. I was like, so
yeah, we had to grab everything in a mad dash,
just running out of the office with all our.
That's how I was. That's how I was when I went to go grab all the stuff.
Yeah, I don't even have a car, so I was just like walked out. I was like, oh, okay, well.
You had to actually physically walk out there with it.
If there was, I'm sure other teams were like that, where if instead of the team house they had those training facilities. I'm sure there's some people who, at least just from seeing the training facility, the practice facilities at the Envy offices, I know that quite a lot of the Fuel players, for example, practice at the offices because those are really nice computers. It's the setup that's the desks are built for Overwatch League specifications. The computers are Overwatch League specifications computers. I don't actually know this for sure, but I would assume that some of the players, not just on the Fuel but just within the league itself, probably brought these competition spec computers back to their apartments to play these officials. It's
and we have to ask a question then, Jayne, from someone that has that coach perspective, and like being as like an org management side perspective of like and keeping the team and running the team, is that how is there any way that you would think to make this less crazy and more competitive at like all levels that like the league could implement? Or are we just sort of like, well, this is how it is, we're gonna have to accept it? Like, can you think of a single compromise or a change that the league could do that we would make something more consistent across the entirety? Would it be like changing the schedule? Would it be changing how the teams are playing? Like, is there anything that they could do? Or you feel like this is just the best solution we have?
I think they're very close to the best solution that they could possibly have. One of the big things is that obviously the Overwatch League has been pretty famous for the amount of leaks that have come out of both of the players and the staff. So the Overwatch, the only real thing. There never been any leaks in the Overwatch League. So the Overwatch League has been really quite proactive with announcing these changes, and it's been kind of good as an outsider and as a viewer to have these constant updates, and seems like they're constantly making changes. But at the same time, taking that as a perspective of somebody who's a player or a staff or a coach, like as a coach, especially in this hero pool meta, your job is really on the line to make sure that you can make your team ready for these hero pools every single week. But when these announcements are coming out, you are finding out these changes either at the exact same time as everybody else is, or within probably 24 hours of the general public finding things out. So it's a very competitive environment where you are expected to perform, and you really don't even know under what rules, conditions, locations, situation. You don't know any of the variables in how and when you're going to compete against which opponent. Like the hero pools, for example, we were at the hero pool bans with the Lucio, the Winston, the Soldier, and the Sombra, right? And then those games that those hero pools were supposed to be played against got banned. And now there's this kind of like lingering uncertainty. It's like, okay, well, that was the hero pools for last week. Games didn't happen. Are we just kind of keeping those hero pools going into this week? Because we didn't re-roll because the games were. So there's that uncertainty where people weren't sure going into this weekend if they were going to be staying on those hero pools that they prepared for the previous week, or if there were going to be new hero pools, and that that set of preparation and scrims was entirely useless. When you're going into this, there's only so much that you can do in terms of general scrim practice or scrim and preparation to try and improve until you actually start to preparing for specific opponents and specific hero pools, compositions, maps, and all that. And if you just don't have that information, you don't even really know if the practice that you're doing is worthwhile in the first place.
Yeah, that raises a whole host of questions as well. Speaking of the hero pools, is that, like you said, we don't know what the hero pools. We're assuming they might be the same, but that's an assumption.
We still don't technically officially know. We're assuming that, yeah. It's like I was talking about this in the pre-show with you, but I was just commenting how right now there's no actual place on the website where hero pools are shown. The Overwatch League website, to be specific. But going
at least one that's not easily accessible for us to find.
Not,
I feel like I'm
we can't find it.
Navigating it. So
I am good at computer. But yeah, in like a month, for example, assuming games keep happening, I'm not going to remember what the hero pool was 2 weeks ago. And especially for statistics, when you're looking at games again, it'd be nice, especially like on the replay viewer, for example. I don't think hero bans are going to be shown any kind of on any UI in the replay viewer. So kind of looking back at previous metas, you're probably just gonna have to like do the mental math and be like, oh, they're not playing this, so the hero bans must have been like this.
I've just been looking through Reddit, which is my worst nightmare. I'm having to go to Reddit to find information. There's no fate worse than death than me having to do that.
It is kind of very interesting that there's this kind of diffuse spread of information does become kind of the primary spread, where this everybody kind of knows what it is posted on Reddit, but if you were trying to look at this information from a very official standpoint or trying to look for primary sources or anything like that, you couldn't find the information. It's
I mean, maybe
not
we're
there.
just illiterate about the Overwatch League website. It's very possible.
Maybe it's entirely possible. However,
I don't think
it's not like it's not like the lack of documentation in Overwatch has not been a problem since pretty much day one. Like the Grabs Dragon combo, that was something the Wikipedia for Overwatch was wrong for over a year on the amount of damage that Hanzo's Dragon Strike did. And then through testing, people realized that it wasn't 200, it was actually 325, and that meant that it could cancel out Transcendence. But for a long time, even pro teams didn't even think to try and actually cancel out the Transcendence or anything like that, because they had just kind of trusted the unofficial haphazard documentation out there that said that the Dragon was 200 damage per second, not like 325 or 320. Whatever it ended up to be during actual testing in custom games, like in the client. So, like, it's lack of documentation is a new concept for Overwatch and the Overwatch League.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Sometimes you feel like you're collecting, like it's like an Indiana Jones or something, finding all these lost artifacts and collecting them together. It's like, now I know the damage numbers. Now I know which hero pools are available. But it is a crazy situation for these teams to be in, and I think you're right in that that's probably the best that we can get to without changing the format significantly right now, because we have a lot of games to make up. We have a lot of games to make up. We don't want to extend the season.
Yeah, I think that extending the season would increase the amount of complexity that the Overwatch League is facing tremendously. Just from the fact that most of their contracts, their talent contract, their producer contracts are very likely, out to a very specific day or something like that. And trying to change contracts, employee contracts, past the point that they are currently set up to do would likely just compound the difficulty immensely. So trying to get the entire Overwatch League either back on track or closer towards being able to finish at the time provided is, very much what I would think is the correct decision. But before we move on, the hero pools thing, we touched on it briefly, but we had Lucio, Winston, Soldier, and Sombra be banned for last weekend's matches, which didn't end up happening. Do you think that should be the same hero bans going into this week? Do you think that they should have redrawn? What was the correct choice for the Overwatch League going into this weekend's extravaganza of 16 games?
Well, then, because we've added that extra layer of complexity too, because last weekend they also announced on John Spector did that they're doing the weighted hero pools, right?
Yes,
and
there's even
hero pools that were just
format.
they've changed the picking format too. So it's like how I've complained to my own personal stream that I feel like I keep on trying to play Jump King, and it's not because I'm bad at Jump King, okay, guys. It's just because I keep changing my setup. That's the real problem here. This is why it's so complex. But it's sort of how I feel for this system as well, is that since we keep changing, like, so we have no games, we haven't had games for a while. Oh, we've also changed the picking format. What heroes would we even pick? How would we even select the new heroes, right? Based off this format, like, it would still be essentially entirely arbitrary, even more arbitrary before, because now we have no data from the last week to use. So I would say the most consistent choice, especially since I've been told that it seems like through the grapevine that contenders, there was an article that came out, I believe, on over.gg.
GG Recon. Oh no, this was over.gg.
Yeah, by Scrubbosaurus. Yeah, and it said that contenders teams are being informed that the hero pools for this week are the same as the hero pools from last week. So if they're doing that for contenders, why would we not do that for Overwatch League? And it makes the most sense logically anyways, because there's nothing to even base it off of. I mean, we do have some data, but it's data that's a week old. We have a new pick system anyways. We might as well just use the hero pool bans from the previous week, because otherwise it's just weird, I guess. I mean, it's going to be weird either way, but
everything's a little bit weird these
might as well
but
keep it
yeah,
consistent, in my view.
changing gears a little bit, there was actually a really cool article put out on PC Gamer yesterday, and it was by, let me find the author's name if I can do that. Emotion Malort.
Yes.
Cool name there. So, and it was the 4th year anniversary of Overwatch. So imagine 4 years later, I guess May 2016 is when it was initially released. We're not quite there yet, but they're already considering it the 4th year anniversary. And Emoji Malort did a really great and long form interview with Jeff Kaplan, and a lot of the things that were brought up I found pretty interesting. I know you found different parts that were interesting than I did, but wanted to kind of go over some of the things that were discussed during that, because we did get some information about kind of Jeff's design philosophy, the way that they're actually approaching Overwatch 2 compared to Overwatch. But yeah, what stuck out to you in this interview?
I mean, immediately right off the bat, they talked about it very early on, was the experimental changes they've been doing to Overwatch, and we've felt them, we've experienced them firsthand. We've talked about the experimental cards, the 1-3-2, or the 3-2-1, whichever format nomenclature you want to say it, how they change it up. And they specifically said that we're probably not going to change it now for Overwatch, but Overwatch 2, anything's on the table. They're like, we could see radical changes, where realistically, when we're talking about a game that's 4 years in its life cycle, and they say they might want to change it again and they want to revamp it a little bit, I don't know. I don't even know what to think about that, because from a competitive standpoint, you have to say like, well, this is worrying. Like, I don't know. This is like if you were to walk onto the soccer field and they said, we're actually using 3 balls today and the snitch from Harry Potter, and we gotta chase this one around. Like, this is a very different game than we've experienced like previously. So that's what immediately stuck out to me, was like how early on they brought it up too.
Yeah, one of the things that Jeff, I think, said in it that really caught my eye is that he said that the players were now getting kind of used to Overwatch, and he felt that now that they were comfortable, players that is, were comfortable with the game, he was okay with doing more kind of disruptive, I think was one of the words that he said, used, disruptive balancing, and more experiments. We're using this experimental card instead of just the PTR, having where casual players who just use the normal client, and especially console players, can also use this experimental mode to find more things that work. And there was a lot of talk about the 3 DPS, and Jeff seems to be very much on board with that. They talked in that article as well that they've moved. They were previously working quite heavily on Overwatch with a little bit of development time onto Overwatch 2, but right now, and I assume this is going to be doubly true with the release of Echo, is that they are almost kind of all cylinders firing on the development for Overwatch 2. Now, in addition, working off of the 3 DPS thing that you were talking about, he went on to kind of discuss his more long-term philosophy, and it seems that not only with the change to 3 DPS and only 1 tank instead of the 2-2-2 role queue, he actually had this point where he didn't have a firm opinion one way or the other, but he did have this kind of open commentary about whether or not barriers actually had a place in the game. And this goes along the lines with him wanting to have 3 DPS. Maybe in general, they think that having more DPS is just healthier for the game, or at least fits in with the more feel of what actual players want. But overall, with these changes, it does seem like Overwatch and Overwatch 2 are moving much, much more towards a casual focus game rather than kind of, a more hardcore competitive game, of which I would probably consider, CSGO or something of that variety.
And it's weird because I don't necessarily think the dichotomy has to exist, right? Because there's like a huge branch in CSGO, even like the game you mentioned, of like you have a very big casual base in CSGO that's like playing that's only playing the ranked matchmaking, that's doing whatever, that's playing like aim lobbies, and then you have like the ESEA pug groups. You also have like the Facets, stuff like that. It's like there is that split there too, but it's a very consistent game from top to bottom in terms of like what the game exists as. And so I don't know whether to be, from someone that's, from the esport background of Overwatch, worried or maybe optimistic, right? About like, well, maybe even does go casual, but if it's a consistent experience, because it's funny that you brought up that Jeff Kaplan said, we want more disruptive changes, but we've just had 3 major shifts in the gameplay in 3 years, if you think about it, because we had no hero limits, and then we had role lock, and now we've had hero pools. So we've had 3 drastic shifts in how the game is played in the past 3 years anyways. So it seems very odd to me that it's like, oh, now we're going disruptive. Now we're getting crazy in Overwatch.
Yeah,
we
let's like, is everything off the
before? Like they had, it was all there.
Now there's spoons on our head.
Yeah, I feel like they're
yeah, and it's not just the moving from kind of the more hardcore to the casual, but it's also moving further and further away from a PvP focused game in towards a PvE focused game. And this is, you know, they talked about bringing back the events. They're not bringing them back. Or sorry, they're not doing any new events. They're bringing back the old events. They're just kind of adding more to them. They're iterating on their previous events. But there was one section from this interview which I found really interesting, and I'm going to read this out. So, and I quote, "I also think in Overwatch 2, the introduction of a heavy focus on PvE is going to be. I don't think all of us are born to be competitive. Like every match, victory and defeat matters. The beautiful part for developers when it comes to PvE, when you're fighting the null sector robots, and this is important, we can make you win more than half of the time. We can't do that in PvP. The null sector robots don't have forum accounts and aren't going to post any mean things like, why did you stun me for 10 seconds? So we can allow players to band together, be appreciative of their teammates, and not feel the other sting of defeat, which is sort of impossible in a competitive PvP game. So this kind of gets me thinking about the way that Blizzard has always kind of been designing their games with a little bit sprinkle of psychology. You know, they had their, I believe it was like rested experience with World of Warcraft, where previously, you know, these are the kind of things that Blizzard does with developing their games, where they wanted to put in a penalty basically to people who grind a lot in World of Warcraft. So after, I don't even remember how many hours or something, you would receive 50% reduced experience. But for the competitive players, that was, you know, it felt like a penalty to them because it was. And then the way that they actually changed that in terms of development was, instead of giving, you know, 8 hour, you know, if you played for 8 hours, after 8 hours, you get 50% reduced experience. They changed that and they called it rested experience. You get, for example, plus 50% more experience for the first 8 hours. So, you know, they changed the number, so it was the exact same system, but it's just simply framed as, you know, if you play for this many hours, you're just going to get a bonus. And then after that, you go back to quote unquote normal. And this is very much kind of the Blizzard philosophy, where they're trying to make it very casual, friendly. Everyone has fun times. And in a competitive PvP game, you know, 50% win rate in every single game. There's a winner and there's a loser. It's a zero-sum game. But especially if you're trying to kind of get behind that psychology and make people feel good, give them a hit of dopamine, you know, you are going to move more towards that PvE, where a person can, you know, victories more a higher percentage of the time. So that definitely seems like the direct that the development of Overwatch and Overwatch 2 are going towards, which, if that is kind of going to be the philosophy for the game as a whole, that does bring the question in, kind of, if that's the focus for Overwatch and Overwatch 2, where does the Overwatch League fit into that?
That is the $1 million question. That is the multi-million dollar question. I have to say,
I threw that to you as a transition, but
no, it's a great question. It's a great question because I don't know. It's worrying, but not, right. Like I said, because you can have very consistent casual game experiences, but if we're shifting where we're no longer even a PvP centric game anymore, does that mean that I'm about to see Method finish raid boss first in Overwatch 2, and that's our new competitive experience? Like, what does this mean for the league?
This is a very realistic future. You have esports teams competing in Overwatch raids like Method. You know, you have the archives event. If you're getting to the point where instead of just having 4-man, you have kind of 6-man compositions, and we are kind of bouncing a little bit more towards PvE and raid type scenarios, you're very much like, you already had people competing for the top scores, and the complexity or the depth on these PvE, you know, they were thimble deep complexity. It really wasn't that challenging. But if you do add some of the more complexity in, and, you know, most of the developers that I'm aware of do have a background in MMOs, you know, they're bringing in that kind of PvE, that rating, and I think that a very, very significant possibility for the future of Overwatch is that we do see these more kind of competitive raids, and, you know, maybe the clan and the guild system is coming to Overwatch. I know it's been very greatly desired feature, or like requested feature, but it's probably going to come in a form that not many people expect.
Yeah, I would hope that it's a side account, like a side feature versus, or like something that's like a branch off for Overwatch 2, is that they're allowing this to be there. But if it becomes a much more front focused thing for Overwatch 2, it does bring into question how that fits into the ecosystem, right? But I don't think they'd be. I find it hard to believe that they're just like, man, we have a lot of people pay millions upon millions of dollars for our league. Time for PvE. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, right? Like, I find that unlikely. It seems much more like it's going to be a something that other casual players can be doing, and they're going to put some more focus on it. But more than likely, I would find unlikely that goes the main route. But if it does, then I don't even have like the tools necessary, right, and the information to begin talking about that, because we've shifted the entire focus of our global league at that point. Like, it's no longer a shooter. we're playing WoW with Overwatch characters.
It's a big question with some very, very far-reaching implications that aren't going to be answered. Probably, they still are probably going to remain unanswered even with the release of Overwatch 2 until we actually finally see how people react to it. The developers are going to make whatever kind of game they're going to make, but it is going to very much heavily how players actually accept it, acclimatize to it. But like, even in the state that Overwatch currently is, which is a very, very PvP focused game, the casual player base in Overwatch is massive. And I assume that if the Blizzard developers are making this kind of change, they're probably making it confidently. They're probably making it off of some pretty significant metrics. And it's no secret that microtransactions and cosmetics have been a very, very large source of revenue for game companies, way more so than esports, I would be pretty confident in assuming. But we won't know for a very long time, but it's certainly a shadow that is lurking, and it's very, very potential to shift the landscape of Overwatch.
Yeah, so I like, it is out there. I find it unlikely that it's going to really affect us as in the, talking about the Overwatch League and the Overwatch League too much, unless I mean, who even knows at this point? Like I said, the infinite monkeys banging around at the typewriters, making the weird scripts. That's the theorem. So maybe, who knows? Maybe I do wake up and that's the universe, but I find that very unlikely. I think it's probably just a side thing to be done. But it is interesting to see that more casual focus, because I think we can create a game that is streamlined for both casual and competitive, that doesn't necessarily alienate people. It's just tough to make that work. I mean, it was like on that topic of barrier discussion, where tanks are something unique to Overwatch, and barriers are something that are pretty unique to Overwatch as a shooter game, but they're cause certain mechanics, especially for DPS players, that are unfun. I remember Similar, the Overwatch League caster who's now back to CSGO, where he started out, was when I posted about how Echo wasn't, and we'll transition this into our next topic as well, is when I talked about how I was really disappointed Echo wasn't a support or a tank, and Similar was like, shut up, Avast, no one wants to play tank or supports, everyone wants to play DPS. And which is like, there is definitely some truth, there's some kernels of truth within there.
There is that mentality. Like, there are people who only want to play DPS, they only want to fret, only want to have control over their own destiny, sort of thing. And I very much get it that if you are going to have this very healthy foundation of casual players, you can always convert a number of those over towards competitive and eventually professional players. You kind of need that funnel in the same way that you need the path to pro to make sure that you have a healthy pro scene to begin with. So it's not like the introduction of a very healthy and flourishing casual scene is the death knell of competitive Overwatch, but it certainly changes the environment. But let's move on. As you said, bring us into the Echo exhibition match. We finally saw some Echo gameplay in the hands of pros. And how did that turn out?
Well, first I'd say it was silly. It was very silly. The actual games themselves, it wasn't really true exhibition matches per se. I'm gonna give credit to Shock and to Dynasty. They did try to come up, because we had the same debacle with preseason in the 2019 season of that, like, which ZP and I was doing. We did some of the work for there too as well, and I believe you did as well. It was very, it just felt players don't want to put forth the effort into matches they feel don't matter, especially if it reveals strats or that's just taking up their time. And it's that balance of like, well, the product and the market and the fans matter, and without them, you're not getting paid any money. But then also, this game has no effect on the league or your standings, and all it does is potentially reveal how you're going to play the teams in the following week, right?
Yeah.
So it was silly, so I wouldn't really use it as a great metric, great.
Yeah,
metric.
it's not like it's going to be representative of how an actual pro team is going to use Echo in a professional match. You know, scrims are different from officials. Even show matches are different from officials. You can never really replicate the conditions that exist in an official match to try and make a team play to their, you know, fullest potential, and an Echo player to be using all the potential synergies that pro players and teams have already theorized. But
well, the thing is, Echo's not even on live yet. So, like, even though that's the other part that I find funny is that Echo's not on live. It's on PTR. These are PTR exhibition games, which I felt like the stakes were even like, it mattered even less if you at least put in a semblance of effort.
Were there any stakes other than people's enjoyment?
Yeah, there were no stakes, right? Like, and then also, like, you know, Echo, we don't know how Echo actually finally being tuned and ends up on live, right? Which could change the roles that people are going to play in her, like how you're going to play her, if she's going to be played at all. So, you know, once again, I always felt like teams are being a little dramatic when it comes to these sort of matches and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're being forced to do this. I can't believe us, people that are paid to play video games, are playing video games and getting paid to do them.
You can have kind of the little princess mentality players, that's for sure.
I've always thought it was a little silly, especially for this case, because Echo's not even on live and we don't even know what the final form for her is going to be. So you don't lose anything by playing it, but whatever, right? Okay, sure. But overall, from what we saw, getting back on the point after that rant, was she looks really strong. She looks really, really, really strong in her current form. The fact that I watched Sinatra morph into a Tracer, like copy that, which we talked about in the last episode of what theoretically could be possible, and get like 3 pulse bombs, and then get killed in Echo Ultimate and come back as Echo and fly around the map, that it's incredible the value you can see Echo get.
Yeah, you can play so aggressive in that copied form. You know, it doesn't any sort of base stats or anything like that. You're still just a standard cut and dry character or whatever you copied, like you're still the basic Tracer. But the fact that on a death, for example, you're not punished, you know, you don't have that 10-second respawn, you don't have the walk back or anything like that. You turn right back into an Echo where you can specifically put a person in a no-win situation. You know, even if they kill you, you just come back as Echo and they're done anyway. So you basically have the potential to put a person in a checkmate situation where there is no counterplay. And that's really, really strong. You know, and the fact that she can exist on flanks pretty easily. She does, like, her repositioning isn't nearly as strong as, you know, Moira, who becomes invulnerable during the repositioning. And yeah, Moira sometimes get punished as well. But man, if an Echo is able to get into a position where she can threaten to engage at pretty much any time, her burst is crazy. You know, I thought I was playing her sticky bombs actually were less effective than I thought they'd be. They're great for spam damage, especially area. And if you chunk somebody down, that can be the initiator. But really, just going in with your left click, like your little try shot, you know, like 2 shots of that plus your beam, you really only need to get a person not down to 0 HP, but you only really need to get them down to half, and then you just zap them with your beam. It's just,
it's a great finisher. It's a fantastic.
And that's why she's like one not good shot. Yeah, it's just they just poof dead.
She's too strong. She's too strong right now is the thing. And
if you get dove, copy the person who dove you. And
yeah, it's defensible. It's a defensible too. It's an offensive and a defensible.
It's an offensive. It's an
it's too good. It's too good, and she exists beyond the flank as well, because she's like, I wouldn't even say she's like good on the flank. It's like she is the flank, because sure, she's not invulnerable when she repositions, but she can do it constantly. She can do it vertically.
Yes.
You know, and we talked about this as well, and you brought up that distinction that most heroes generally had that difference between vertical and horizontal mobility. She has both.
And Echo does what Echo wants, man.
It's crazy strong. It's very, very strong, that the ability to be that mobile. That's, in fact, arguably that is the strongest part of her kit at a base level, because generally when you have ult-based heroes, those heroes aren't very good in the neutral game, and the neutral game being they don't have ult, right? And examples of that are like Sombra or maybe Genji, where they do okay poke, but they're not really doing much necessarily without some extreme coordination.
They're like a fly. They're like buzzing around. You have to be aware of them so that they don't get too much ult charge. But like while they're getting ult charge, they're not really a big deal. You know, they're a threat in the way that you don't want them to have a crazy number of ult per time.
But Echo is a fly on anabolic steroids with high test, and Echo is a gigantic fly that lands upon you and crushes you and your family whole.
Yeah,
Echo is insanely good in the neutral while having a good ult.
I remember a really old CSI episode where they were, the scene where a teenager got murdered or something, and then at the end of the day they realized that the kids were playing a game of chicken where they took an Uzi and they spun it around a pole, so it was just like shooting in every single direction.
Wow,
and
CSI is very dark. I did not realize CSI was so
CSI
dark.
was it's like super Russian roulette, The Echo's just
I guess
there,
so.
spamming abilities, spamming left click, got the beam, and the beam works on shields too. I'm not sure if that's an unintended mechanic.
Which I like though, because it works on Maywall as well. It works on Maywall. Like you can actually use focus down Maywall, which I think is good.
If a character is strong against everything, Maywall is a subset that is everything. So, a counter to May is a counter to everything. But with that, let's pivot this a little bit. So with the hero pools and everything changing, basically, does this mean, with players and teams already having to adapt week to week, does this mean that you think Echo could be introduced sooner rather than, can she just be kind of slotted in there right as soon as she hits live? Because we're having the meta change every single week. It's kind of expected at this point. Echo hits live, Echo hits Overwatch League the next week. What do you think?
I mean, considering that they have talked about, they've shifted when we had that earlier discussion about Overwatch as a game, right? Not just as the competitive product in Overwatch League, but Overwatch as a game, they've really turned around the development time into more of like, we're pushing out features and we're pushing out balance changes in particular. We're much more aggressive. I could definitely see Echo, especially since they're already planning to tune her on PTR. If they tune her and then put her live, that's possible. They have had instances, I believe, where they keep heroes for a bit before release. I can't remember off the top of my head, honestly, but it's sort of a coin flip, right? Of how do they feel? Would they rather the character sit there and come out more balanced and they have some more time to iterate, or would they rather her be live? Because also the longer she's on PTR, the less impact it has, right? It's like you're sitting there with the product and the product is ready to go and it may not be quite ready. It's sort of like you want to push it out the doors, and it's very different like a car or like more of a physical product where once it's out there, you can't bring it back. You can always bring back Echo.
Counterpoint to that, though, Brigitte had 7 consecutive nerfs when she was originally released. It's not like it could through it.
True, but how do you get that data without playing her, right? Like that's the problem with PTR.
You get the data by playing her. It's a chicken and the egg sort of thing. You'll balance her faster and probably more accurate if you see her in pro play. But the pros will probably hate her, and it'll be a meme about how strong she is, or maybe all of us super wrong. And none of us are wrong. No one has been wrong. No one has ever been wrong on the power level of a character ever before in the history of Overwatch. So pretty confident that Echo is strong. Echo is strong.
I'm confident in that as well.
Yeah. So let's we had some comments on the channel from last week I wanted to go through. So last week we asked people what they thought about Echo, and we had some great comments. So again, if you guys are posting comments, specifically on the YouTube is where we're going to be pulling most of these from, but we want to be engaging with you guys as much as possible. So if you do have questions that you want us to answer or comments about the topics that we discuss every week, make sure you leave them in the comment section and we'll read them out. But the first comment that is coming is from Alicid, I believe, and it says, I hate the fact that they have the balls to release a character in that state to the and also that they lack any respect to the tank and support player base by not giving them the character they need by not giving them the character they need to keep the role alive. Every ability she has is okay as a character defining ability in a vacuum, like hook, res, or flashbang, but then give one character all 4. It's a huge middle finger to at least 50% of the player base that actually cares. What's next? Drop 5k HP tanks that have sim shields and can fly, and an invincible support with 200 HPS second map wide. It would have been something I could have let pass if we could pick exactly the character I want to play, but those characters are not in the game. But even if they were in the game, they would have been DPS anyway, so what is life? I guess Jeff wants half their player base to sell their soul in queue, and the other half to sell their soul in game. Let's ban 6 tanks and 5 supports next so we can have the gameplay every DPS and Jeff wants. I'll go back to TF2 for now. It seems like the devs over there care more about the game, and they aren't even updating the game. So
wow. I was a fan I
love the passion.
And a person that is very hyperbolic. I love when people get very hyperbolic to make their point. And it's not even sarcasm, because there's nothing funnier than hyperbolic statements to try to get the point across. And people are like, well, this person's very reactionary, but it's like, well, that's not the point, right? The exaggerated language is to show how you feel.
Yeah, it's the emotion that matters. Obviously, this person
It was a good rant. It was a good rant.
It was a great rant.
I was a big fan of it, and it holds some kernels of truth. But on the opposite side, Jayne, on the opposite side of the comments was Dead Adventure. Dead Adventure after that says they had hoped it was support. They would hope that Echo was a support, obviously, but then they realized that the characters before this had been released were both a support and tank. And also, Tim got to introduce her, so we got to see their favorite streamer look at Echo. So I feel like that, they'll probably have to nerf their ult a little bit, but overall they're like, pretty good, pretty great. I'm pretty positive about Echo. So we have like Allison, who's like way up here. Dead Adventure's way down here. You'll see that range of people, how they feel about Echo.
We also had another pretty moderate take from Sean. He says, I'm fine with Echo being DPS. I mean, I would have preferred her to have been for two specific reasons. Firstly, I love when supports pop off in the Overwatch League. Echo's ult could mean we could see some crazy situations where a support might have been able to clutch like a DPS or tank. Team dies in its overtime, Alarm, Rouge Hong, Twilight, Violet, flexing to take a 1v2 or stalling for reinforcements, getting a pick, going Widow, Doomfist Tracer, Lee lists some more heroes. And then his second reason is I am that player that has 600 hours on tank, 300 support, and like 30 on DPS. When my team would go 5 DPS, I just feel bad and go Winston, Ryan, or Zenana because I don't know why I'm stupid. Then with Rollock, I queue for everything, which means most of the time I end up as support tank naturally anyway. So my only way to get into the DPS fix is via a support or tank who can turn into a DPS mid-game. So I really like this comment. I do, there's some supremely talented support players in the Overwatch League with some absolutely crazy mechanics. Same thing goes with tank players, a lot of the tank players being flex players, but giving these extremely talented mechanical players as well as allowing support players, traditional support players, to start developing mechanical skills. Like that's one of the big reasons that I played so much Ana when I started as a support main. It's because I knew that Overwatch was the very first FPS that I ever. But playing Ana, I could play a role I was comfortable in, one that didn't require my headshot skill to actually carry the game or anything like that, and start to really slowly build up my mechanical skills. So not only is it good for people who play support and tank and want to start making those mechanical plays and being way more clutch in kind of overtime and very important situations, but and then also just more love for the role in general. So Sean, I liked your comment as well.
And I think that's really, we hit it all. We've had I would say today was a very fast-paced episode because we had a couple hit topics to talk about, and we had to rush to get our production set up. So thank God for our producers as well. Mike, Mr. Bodkin, our producer, doing this, and all the social media people. It's been a rush to get everything pivoted at all levels because of the COVID crisis. But hopefully everyone's staying safe. I know we are. But that's pretty much all the time that we have for today. But we also want another thing that we want people to talk about, because going into the games this weekend and thinking about that article that just released for Overwatch 2 that Jeff was interviewing with, what do you guys think should be the focus of Overwatch 2? Should Overwatch 2 have a little bit more of that PvE element that maybe they can lean into and change? Should it be still a much more of a bigger focus on the PvP, how it is now? Should it be any change at all? Should it be 50-50? Let us know what you guys want to think there down below, because I think that's pretty interesting as you look forward about what does Overwatch 2, how does it shape the future of Overwatch?
Absolutely. And just a reminder, every week we are going to pick a couple comments that you guys post to read out and share your thoughts. We'll share our thoughts on it, and we'll all just think together. I know thinking is dangerous, but I assure you we can do it in safety.
I hate it. I hate thinking. I don't want to think at all.
Effort. But that's it for us today. So our show has twice a week, Tuesday and Friday at 5 p.m. Central. Normally our show was starting to be pre-recorded, but we've jumped right into the live section, and boopity boop boop, I see you in Twitch chat. Yes, we actually can see all your comments, regardless of what platform you are watching this on, whether it's YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Mixer, etc. We can see your comments during the show. If you do,
so don't say anything too mean.
Yeah,
okay.
Don't say anything mean. That's number one. But if you do have anything to kind of contribute to one of our segments, feel free. We're not going to respond to chat the entire time, but if you do a great comment in there, only the highest quality of comment on this show here. So we do see you. So hello, Wave. But yeah, our next show will be Friday, 5 p.m. Central, and then directly after this, we'll be going to Off the Break with Lando. Avast, any closing remarks?
Oh, I hate thinking, Jayne. It's just so hard for my brain. It's so hard for my brain to think them these days, you know? That's why we want the viewers to submit their comments so I don't have to think, really. That's the key. That's the key. If I just
the real
read
key
it
is
off.
crowdsourcing our intelligence and
Exactly. So
rel-
I want to be
relying on the
the
groupthink of our-
GoFundMe of Overwatch shows. That's what I want to be. I'm just gonna skim off the top of the ideas of others.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're watching on the VOD, I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you all on Friday.